Joe Aston, welcome to 7:30.
Good to be here.
How do you describe the relationship between Qantas and Anthony Albanese?
Cosy, co-morbid. It's been a long-standing relationship, particularly under the previous leadership. Sometimes if you work the right assets, you get lucky.
That's a big word, asset. I think you used the word cultivate as well. Let's talk precisely about the question of the upgrades. Is it enough of a defence in your analysis for the Prime Minister to say that he declared his upgrades?
Well, I don't think it's appropriate behaviour whether it's declared or not. I mean, to solicit upgrades when you are on private travel and you are the Minister for Transport regulating the airline industry, to approach the CEO of the national airline to ask to have your economy ticket magically turned into a pointy-end ticket, it's just inappropriate conduct whether or not it's declared or not. And I think if Anthony Albanese had been Financial Services Minister and had called the CEO of a bank and said, would you please put $50,000 in my bank account, and then disclosed it on the pecuniary interest register, I certainly don't think anyone would be sitting around saying, oh, well, he declared it, that's fine.
Now, in the book, I think that information is sourced as insiders. Are you certain, because I don't think we've heard from the Prime Minister on this subject of him calling Alan Joyce for upgrades. Are you sure that's what happened?
Yeah, sure, I'm very comfortable with my sourcing.
Now, are you saying that these frequent flyer upgrades were designed as a subtle or not so subtle system of political influence?
Well, I'm not trying to say that there is established causality between Anthony Albanese asking for and receiving a benefit and Anthony Albanese making some decision or not making some decision. I'm not saying that, and I don't think you can say that. But look, more broadly, that's a very widely. This conduct is not, Anthony Albanese is just one person, and he's unfortunately in the middle of this. But I mean, to suggest that this isn't widespread is just, this has been going on for generations. Many politicians accept upgrades from Qantas and from other airlines, and I think it's part of the reason why Qantas is one of the most influential, powerful institutions in Australia.
What about the titular Chairman's Lounge? You've called your book The Chairman's Lounge. What role does the Chairman's Lounge, in your analysis, play in exerting influence or Qantas trying to make friends in high places?
Well, it's a scheme without peer. There's nothing like it in any other country, and I think if you want to measure its success in influencing Canberra, you only have to look at how government travel is conducted. There's actually policy of the government that government travellers, from members of parliament right down to junior public servants, must take the cheapest flight available. And they also are forbidden from taking into account lounge access when they book their flights. Now, both of those things are being openly flouted in circumstances where Qantas gets 90 cents in the dollar in financial 2024 of all of that government travel. It's just one of the many levers at its disposal.
Now, Virgin operates an invite-only club,
Yes.
doesn't it? To which
not in
you're a
Canberra.
member?
Yes, I am, and I have been for many years.
So what's the difference? What's the significant difference between the two? You said not elsewhere in the world, but there is another one in Australia.
Well, as in outside of Australia, there are no other countries where this operates. Virgin established its own version of the Chairman's Lounge when John Borghetti was CEO of Virgin.
And does it operate in the same way with the same effort to exert influence through its existence?
Yeah, well, I think that's its intention. It hasn't been as successful. They closed the private equity barbarians who own Virgin. They closed the one in Canberra. I suspect they are ruining the moment that they did that, because the Canberra one is really the one that is the most important for strategic reasons.
Do you like being in the Virgin one?
Sure, yeah, I've been there many times. I've been to the Chairman's Lounge as a guest as well. I'm always have my eyes peeled for stories, and look, I will take criticism if that's thrown at me for being a member, but I also would point people to the columns I've written about Virgin Australia while I've been there. They haven't been particularly positive.
Is there any evidence that you have been able to unearth in the research for this book that Anthony Albanese's relationship with Alan Joyce played a role in the government's decision to knock back Qatar's request for more flights into Australia?
Well, look, what is implausible is that the Prime Minister's office had nothing to do with the Qatar decision. It was all set and in train Catherine King's department was in favour of it. Catherine King had verbally expressed her support for it. And all of a sudden, everything changed. Now, Catherine King repeatedly denied in Parliament to say which of her colleagues intervened over that, and Alan Joyce repeatedly refused to answer whether or not he had lobbied either Catherine King or the Prime Minister about that decision. So look, it's very hard to imagine a decision of any political sensitivity in the Albanese government that would not go through the Prime Minister's office.
The largest part of your book is the analysis of what happened to Qantas, its brand, what happened to Qantas. Did Qantas exploit COVID to fundamentally change its business, or was Qantas forced to fundamentally change its business by COVID?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think both arguments can be made, but what is abundantly clear is that Alan Joyce and his management team saw an opportunity after they had survived the first few weeks of COVID, and they were so strong they said, we don't need government support, so Virgin shouldn't get government support, therefore Virgin fell over. Once they got through that first few weeks, they got to June 2020 and they saw an opportunity to really, really savagely cut costs in order to massively increase its profitability. So they saw that as an opportunity, and they sacked 10,000 people, which was way too many to operate a functional airline once they came out of COVID in 2022, and unsurprisingly the wheels fell off. Now,
the coalition government paid the airline $2.7 billion in subsidies during the pandemic, obviously including a very large amount, $865 million for JobKeeper. Should they have paid some of that back?
Look, I have a view here that might not be popular. I don't know that Qantas got too many subsidies. I don't know that that is actually an unreasonable level of subsidies if they had behaved ethically while they were in receipt of the subsidies. So they actually got a lot less than US carriers, European carriers. But the issue is they then acted in an inappropriate way, including by illegally sacking 1,700 people who were on JobKeeper. So I think that's sort of the distinction.
What else was unethical in your view about what they did, or according to the analysis in your book, what are you arguing?
Well, certainly the 1,700 illegally sacked workers. I think that the worst thing alongside that was the COVID credit scheme, which is where they took $1.6 billion of passengers' money, put it into credits when actually all of those customers were entitled to a cash refund. They didn't tell customers that they were entitled to a cash refund, and then they spent 3 years making it as difficult as possible for those customers to get their money back.
Are you clear after the research you've done for this book that that was intentional or a product of the time?
Well, look, I think it's... Look, that's hard to say, but it is one has to be a little bit cynical when something is made that difficult that it's not difficult on purpose. They had many, many opportunities to make this easy. There was nothing stopping them even in 2021, 2022, saying, OK, we're past the worst of it, we're just going to refund this money. Some of it, of course, was accidental, some of it was a function of dysfunction, but I think it's hard to say that they couldn't have done a lot more if they wanted to.
How much, you start off earlier in the book by saying that Alan Joyce had done a good job transforming the legacy airline into a competitive modern airline. So what changed, what went wrong in your view with Alan Joyce as CEO?
Well, I think time worked against him. I think,
in what way?
Well, I think the longer someone stays in a position of that kind of power, and being CEO of Qantas is right up there with being Prime Minister. It's a world of incredible power and deference. I think that affects people, and I think that it would have affected Alan Joyce just like it would have affected anyone else. And I think his judgment became impaired as time went on. And I think also, to his disservice, he, in 2018, lost a chairman in Lee Clifford who was much tougher and certainly definitely the boss. And when Richard Goyder and the rest of his board took over, I think Alan Joyce really was unchallenged from that point.
You say that Alan Joyce was changing, but how much of the criticism here should be sheeted home to the chairman of the Qantas board, Richard Goyder? For example, Alan Joyce was allowed to sell a very large number of shares to pay for a home that he was buying, as the story went at the time. Who was responsible for that, Alan Joyce or Richard Goyder?
Oh, well, that's Richard Goyder, and I think that decision is indefensible. And I don't just say that in my book. Qantas's largest shareholder says that. So does, in fact, Goyder's predecessor Lee Clifford said to me that he would not have agreed to that. So, yeah, I think very clearly Alan Joyce made some decisions that were very bad, but in the end he was reporting to a board. He had bosses, and those bosses were running around saying he was the best CEO in Australia, when the Australian people thought he was toxic, and they had fallen completely out of love with Qantas. So I in fact do blame the Qantas board first and foremost.
Just finally, you mention, and this is an incredible fact, I think, that 16 million Australians are signed up to the Qantas frequent flyer program. Are 16 million Australians caught in a scented trap?
They're in an abusive relationship. They are, yes. And this is something else I talk about in my book, is of course that Qantas knows, and they will never admit that this is true, but they know that no matter how poorly they treat their customers, a very large proportion of them will keep coming back. And that is the sign of an effective monopoly. And part of the main reason of that is not just their competitive position of market share as an airline, it's that frequent flyer program and the brilliant way they play on status anxiety. I need to be a gold frequent flyer. I need to be a platinum frequent flyer. I need to get access to the lounge because that means something about who I am. It's the same reason people buy platinum credit cards or titanium credit cards. I mean, it's a system, and with such deep penetration, 16 million people, that'd be like if one of the American carriers' frequent flyer programs had 250 million members, which I can assure you none of them have even close to that number. So, that's the thing. I mean, Qantas it has a low incentive to really change at times, and that's part of why this just can keep happening.
And just to come back then to the politics, so the politics apply. Although I think Peter Dutton today is saying he never called Alan Joyce, he had received some upgrades, that the Qantas problem applies to all sides of politics.
Well, I think that's been proven by the Morrison government experience. There's no doubt about that. I think Qantas has been the most effective lobbyist in Canberra for 30 years, and there's been many governments of many stripes during that time. I have low expectations that that's going to change.
Joe Aston, thank you very much indeed. Congratulations on the book and thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Sarah.